Hello everyone, I'm Darcy Saul and this is the video essay portion for my second assignment for the University class Motion Design and Composition. This video will go over the production of my project Pocket Parts, as well as reflecting on what I struggled with and learnt throughout the way. For context, Pocket Parts is a short film of a person playing an older video game in which they construct a cyberdeck. For those who don't know, a cyberdeck is a custom-built computer, usually made with thrifted or old items. The concept was first used by people like William Gibson in their sci-fi novels. Now, however, cyberdecks are much closer to a mainstream concept. Now that we have gone over all this, let's get into the video, starting with the proposal document and style guide. Like said in the introduction, I just want to quickly go over my proposal document. The full document will be available to tutors, as a link will be provided in the submission document. I also quickly want to point out that the animatic couldn't be played in the PDF itself due to the tools I was using, so a separate link will be added for the animatic. With that, let's get on. Week 8. This is the first week back from this semester's study break and the week I finally get started on this project. The first thing I did was get the visual inspiration for both the overall project as well as the cyberdeck itself. This wasn't overly hard and I was able to gather most of my images in Pinterest and add them to Pinterest boards. This board included sections for the 3D style inspiration, the 2D style inspiration, and the overall vibe of feelings, as well as the cyberdeck case inspirations. I also gathered videos of other people building their own cyberdecks for a more in-depth understanding of my subject. In this part, I did deviate a little from the initial idea from my past assignment, aiming for a more brighter look. Following this, I quickly jumped into concept art for the cyberdeck. While I would usually complete the animatic and storyboard first, the design and function of the cyberdeck would greatly influence the events that happened in the short film. The concept art process consisted of planning out the components for the cyberdeck, determining the build process for the cyberdeck, and determining a ton of ideations for cases and layouts. The ideations were mainly case focused, and this would be the most customizable part of the project. After finishing ideating, I fleshed out 3 of the best ideas I had to see which one would look best visually. Finally, I decided on the typewriter cyberdeck idea and fleshed out even more. I also created orthographic drawings, so this was personal use as I then 3D modelled the cyberdeck later on. Following this, I planned out the order of events for the film and used that to help create the storyboard. Following the storyboard, I created an animatic. For said animatic, I used the software CapCut. This was not the final software used for the project, however this specifically was used for the animatic as it allowed me to edit it while I was on the go. The software also had some pre-made transitions which I played around with and helped me create the final animatic quicker. After completing said animatic, I had my first shot at creating a production schedule. Fair warning, I do remake the schedule multiple times throughout the project as things changed, so don't be surprised when I mention this later on. After completing all of this work, I moved on to the production phase. For the rest of this week, I started 3D modelling my cyberdeck assets. Most of the models were completed by the end of the week and UV unwrapped. This meant I could quickly jump into finishing the 3D models, texture them and animate them later on. Week 9. My main task for this week was to finish the 3D models, the project illustrations, as well as experiment with hand live-action animation. In terms of 3D models, all were finished within around a day, and I didn't end up texturing or animating until later in the week as I needed more time to focus on the 2D aspects and live action aspects for this week. Following the 3D, I created illustrations for the 2D aspects and animations for the project. Later on, many of these assets were remade to better fit the goal aesthetic. However, the ones I made first were very useful in terms of testing out my live action footage techniques. In terms of said testing, I took pictures of my hands and arms in 2 different positions, open and pointing closed. I then tried to overlay them with my other illustrations using green screen and masking tools, such as the chroma key. This, however, did not work. If I still had my video for the first pass, I will show it up here, but to summarise, due to the tools I had access at home, I instead had to lower the opacity and layer over the top to show it. Now, as you may be able to see on the screen, this is nowhere near the quality of the full finished motion graphics project. However, it did provide the information I needed to plan out a better illustration, better pacing, potential special effects, and techniques for the hand animation. Week 10. I completed a little less work this week than usual, so this section will be quite shorter. This week, however, I decided on what the final illustration style should be and started working on those illustrations. I also was looking into pre-made texture packs for my 3D models as I wouldn't be able to create custom textures with the time I had left for this project. Following this, I planned next week's tasks. As you can see, I didn't do a lot of work this week. I believe I was sick at the time and was struggling to work for long periods of time. This was made up next week, we will now go over. Week 11. We are now in the final stretch of the 3 weeks. On Monday, I managed to get around to texturing my 3D models, making them animation ready. During class this week, we had our mandatory check-in with our tutor. During this, and with the advice of my tutor, I decided on wiring the cyber deck with hand-drawn illustrations. Due to the messiness of the project I showed him, however, we also decided that I would show up next week with a more finished project for more advanced feedback. I also nailed down the focus techniques of this assignment: color correction and grading, 3D render passes, and rotoscoping. The rotoscoping was used to remove the backgrounds of my arms and hands image, as I don't have a proper green screen setup to use. The 3D render passes were to help me properly import the longer 3D animations and images I had, and the color correction and color grading were used to establish the mood, tone, atmosphere, and general look of the final product, which would be especially helpful when it comes to making it look like an old screen. This is also the week I found out that I would be taking part in a research project with other design students that would last 4 days and would take place in week 13, the final week of the project. Because of this, I created an updated production schedule to hopefully make up for that time. Another important thing that happened this week was the release of the new Nintendo game Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. This became quite the good representation of what I wanted the live action footage in my project to look like for the hands. Following all this, I planned out the project's special effects, as well as completed the 3D animations for things such as the turntable, the wiring animation, and the construction animation, all done before I could do the VFX. I then got the wiring animation integrated as well, able to integrate the rest of the 3D next week. As this was the final full week I had left, I tried to make up the most of it. However, this section may still be slightly shorter, as all these tasks took longer periods of time than usual. On Monday, I integrated all the 3D aspects of the project fully, making them ready for VFX overlays. I also gathered the live action footage for my final project and was able to integrate them fully with the rotoscoping tool. Around half of those integrations were also animated, and I exported the whole project for easy showcase during next day's class and check-in. The next day, Tuesday, was my final class for the semester and my final chance for in-person feedback. I was able to gain valuable feedback this week, including suggestions for better timing and pacing, additional VFX ideas, as well as potential sources of inspirations I hadn't been aware of or thought of. I also created an updated plan for what to get done as my minimal viable outcome, allowing me to complete my project well without overwhelm. This was done due to the time limit I would have next week. Wednesday was 3D animation focus, once again. The whole day was spent updating, exporting, importing, and integrating better timed 3D animations, allowing for better pacing of the video. The rest of the week was spent animating the hands, adding the necessary VFX such as the wiring and selection screens, as well as planning sounds, filters, and any additional VFX I wanted to add, such as the following celebration scene that you will see in the video. Week 13. This was the final official week of the project, though due to the outside commitments of the research project, I was unable to work on this until Friday, giving me 3 days to complete this project. On Friday, I completed the final celebration scene, as well as the extra 2D VFX, the vines overlaying the video that you will see. I then imported these scenes, however I decided to make 2 different project versions. The first is pre-VFX and pre-transitions, and the other is with the VFX and transitions. This meant I could work on the 2 smaller projects, which helped with export timing. On Saturday, I exported the project without the transitions or VFX to make it easier to edit later. This took a long time, however, and it saved me quite a bit of time in the long term, as it meant I could add transitions and VFX over the top without having to render every layer separately. It did take the majority of the day, as my After Effects files kept crashing. I did manage to eventually fix this, however. Turns out the overlaying vine animation VFX, as well as the end celebration scenes, were corrupted after the first crash and therefore stopping the program from rendering properly. Following this, I removed them, rendered everything out, and then added it in on the next file when I was doing the transitions, which fixed the problem. Finally, today, I finished the project by adding the final versions of the sound effects, final VFX, and the filters. This final project should be linked in the description, though I cannot promise it is there. While the project definitely could be improved, this was my first time combining 2D animation, 3D animation, and live footage. I'm quite proud of how it turned out, especially considering the time frame I had. This was quite the satisfying process, and I definitely plan to use these tools and processes in the future. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I do really hope you enjoyed it, and if you're interested in watching my official Pocket Parts animation for yourself, simply click in the link of the description. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!